Welcome Internet to Psychologist Casual Review. Today we're going to be reviewing the short article Hating Counter-Transference by Donald Winnicott. So this text is very interesting in many regards, as it's going to tackle the subject of hate, but not just the hate of the patient towards the therapist, but also the hate within the therapist towards the patient, which is not an easy task, as Donald Winnicott points out. It's not easy at all, as often there's many layers of cognitive reasoning that get into the process of preventing the therapist from feeling the hate. So what he says is that, and his whole premise in this article is going to say that basically for the analysis of psychotic patients and antisocial patients, understanding and feeling the hatred of the therapist towards these patients is necessary. So why is it necessary? It's necessary because it's a form of contact that the patient sparks within the therapist, but they spark it for a very special reason. They spark it in order to be able to reach a level of communication in which the hatred can flow on both sides. So this might seem very counterintuitive, as normally in therapy we push towards the ability to love and care. And it's also true, we do that. But the ability to hate is a very important ability, as it allows the individual to be able to express what he feels at the moment, even against someone that they love. And hatred in the context of Winnicott in counter-transference doesn't mean, and this is very important, doesn't mean that the therapist speaks that hate to the patient, or utters the hate, or acts out the hate. Quite the opposite. The therapist has to understand that his hateful side of himself and be able to contain it within himself, and this is also the brilliance of the article, and at some point be able to make the patient understand what is happening, that there is hate in the relationship, but that hate isn't going to destroy either the therapist nor the patient. This hate can be contained. And that's a very important premise, because he says that fundamentally, when we ignore our hatred as therapists for patients, what we're doing is basically entering a state of denial of our own emotions, of denial of part of ourselves. Thus, we are preventing part of the relationship to be explored. And by doing so, we are basically preventing ourselves from going forward. In a way, we remain stuck with our good intentions. However, this hate has to be analyzed, and this is very important for Winnicott. This hate should not basically spiral into oneself in a circle in which the only escape route would be the acting out or firing the patient. Quite the opposite. One has to analyze why we feel that hate, what makes us, both on our historic level, what it sparks within us, but also what it sparks for the patient. What is the patient looking for through causing that hatred in our counter-transference? Are they trying to reenact rejection? Are they trying to reenact a form of safety? Because Winnicott gives a very interesting example of a young child that he virtually adopted for a few months, which had antisocial tendencies. And he said that fundamentally that child was maddening. He basically broke rules. He didn't listen. And he said that that child just acted again and again in a certain way, until the right interpretation was found by Winnicott, upon which apparently the antisocial tendencies diminished. And this is very important, because it is true that people with antisocial tendencies or borderline organizations might test the therapist, push them to the very limit of what is tolerable, be it by screaming, be it by slamming the door when leaving the session, be it by basically insulting the therapist. All of these things build up something within us. That something is basically the testing of the patient within us. And the fact that we have to absolutely acknowledge the hate of like, I hate this behavior. I hate when the patient is acting like this, but not reject the patient because of that hate. Being able to contain it shows to the patient that it is possible to endure hate and that hate is not going to cause rejection. And if we are, how can I say, stuck on our good sentiments, we are preventing the interpretation of that hate, the fact that hate is not destructive. Thus, we are creating basically the premises of a sadomasochistic relationship where the patient just is a sadist and the therapist a masochist. Winnicott, and this is very important, does not talk like that. That's me giving you the gist of what I understood on the article. That doesn't mean it's truth, but that's how I interpreted Winnicott's words. Also, and this is very important, he says that basically the good intent might not be able to help the patient, and that for people studying or working with or trying to treat people with psychosis or antisocial behavior, it is very important, because if we're not going to engage with this feeling, with this emotion, something will remain stuck. Also, very interestingly enough, Winnicott is going to draw a parallel between the analyst standing his hate and containing it within with the job of a mother. That the mother hates her child because many reasons, because the child is imperfect, because the child does not represent what she wanted, because the child basically hurt her at birth, because the child sucks too hard on her breasts, because the child can play up, because the child might not understand how she sacrifices herself at certain points, the child might be ungrateful, and so on and so forth. Yet, the good mother, or the good enough mother, to use Winnicott's vocabulary, is going to accept that. She's going to basically contain her hatred for her baby and not make the baby suffer the experience of punishment linked to the hate. She's going to be able to, in a way, show that she survives the hate and that she's not going to retaliate the hatred towards baby. And this is exactly what the analysts should aim to do. Contain the hate, contain it, interpret it, find the right interpretation for the individual or the right containment. And sometimes even just having a setting and maintaining the setting. For example, the tariffs or the basically the hour, or not going forward, or for example ending the session on time. All of these things can be enough to contain the hate, because as Winnicott points out, sometimes just providing the setting is a showing that there is no retaliation, that the relationship is going forward regardless, and that something can still happen, something that can in a way change the relationship for the better, not by denying hate, not by rejecting it, but on the contrary, accepting it both from the patient and within the therapist. Again, and this is still so important, it's not about unleashing the hate on the patient, absolutely not. It's about us therapists finding a productive way of being able to translate the hate in something that the patient can manage and in a way find useful to grow. Now, for Winnicott, he says that fundamentally all analysts should be analyzed to the point where they understand that they have hatred within themselves. However, many might feel very reticent for a plethora of reasons, because fundamentally hate is not an easy emotion to bear, as it confronts us with our own bad sides as therapists, as people even. And it's not easy to really come face to face with one's worst sides. And also, it's not easy to basically allow oneself to think about one's hatred for another human. And let alone someone that we're meant to help, meant to basically try and alleviate in terms of symptomatology. So it's not easy by any means, but it's necessary. It's necessary, why? Because without analyzing, without taking into account our feelings of what is happening, we are depriving the patient from basically a certain form of expression, of an emotional expression. And we are also containing this therapy to our own needs of being a good therapist, the needs of the patient being better, fulfilling our needs for gratitude, i.e., if we don't allow ourselves to understand the full extent of our hatred, we are just going to demand the patient to be a nice, sympathetic, happy patient that in a way gratifies us, like, oh, you're such a good therapist, you're so great. But no, this is not what it's about. What it's about is about psychic growth. And sometimes psychic growth necessitates hate, as it necessitates love. Both exist and both need to be used. If we only have one, we only have part of the puzzle. We don't have the other part. That's why it's so important to merge both of those. And fundamentally, it's very hard because, of course, we are not socially inclined to talk about hate. We have never been socially inclined to talk about it. But what Winnicott points out is it's not because we're not inclined, but we should not do the work of thinking about it, of trying to elaborate on it, trying to understand it, and finally helping the patients, they themselves understand the hate within them and what they're causing within the outside world. All of this in a frame which the patient can understand and is able to accept, because the aim isn't to be brutal, quite the opposite. The aim is to give understanding. And if you hurt someone, then that understanding just basically goes down the drain, because the person can't hear you when you're hurting them. Therefore, the hate needs to be first thought about, constructed, and in a way basically digested by the therapist before they can ever talk about it. A bit like a mother might, in her deepest of cause, hate the child at certain points, but still love them and make the effort to digest negative and show the child that hatred is not going to destroy anyone. And for Winnicott, it's the mother that brings the hatred in the relationship, not the baby. So that's very interesting. And it's on that meta-psychological note that I think we should end this video. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them by in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.